The book that vanished. There exists an ancient text, one that was quoted in the New Testament itself, that vanished almost entirely from the Western Bible. For over 1,000 years, it survived in only one place, the remote highlands of Ethiopia, guarded in mountain monasteries, copied by hand generation after generation. Why would such a book disappear? Some say it contains secrets the Church never wanted spoken aloud. Stories of 200 mighty angels who abandoned heaven itself. Tales of a forbidden race, half divine, half human, who once walked among us. Prophecies of cosmic judgment that shook the very foundations of religious authority. Tonight, we open those forbidden pages once more. We return to an age before the Great Flood, when one catastrophic choice caused angels to lose paradise and plunge the world into an era of darkness. The man who walked with God. In the book of Genesis, a single verse hints at something extraordinary. Enoch walked with God, and he was no more because God took him. These words suggest that Enoch did not die as ordinary men do. He was lifted into the heavenly realms, and according to ancient tradition, he recorded everything he witnessed there. The structure of heaven, the work of creation, the movement of stars, the fate of angels, the final destiny of humanity. These writings became known as the Book of Enoch. Modern scholars believe the text we have today was compiled over several centuries, beginning around 300 BCE and reaching completion in the 1st century. Originally written in Hebrew or Aramaic, its earliest fragments were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. Proof that ancient Jewish communities regarded it as divine revelation. The Book of Enoch isn't a single narrative. It's a collection of 5 extraordinary visions. The Book of the Watchers tells of 200 angels sent to guard humanity who broke their sacred oath, took human wives, and fathered a race of giants called the Nephilim. They taught mankind forbidden knowledge and paid an eternal price. The Book of Parables contains prophetic visions of a figure called the Son of Man, chosen by God to judge both the righteous and the wicked, including the fallen angels themselves. The astronomical book reveals Enoch's journey through the gates of heaven, guided by the archangel Uriel, witnessing the courses of the sun and moon and a perfect celestial calendar. The dream visions retell human history from Adam to the Maccabees, using animals to represent nations, an allegorical panorama of the ages. The Epistle of Enoch divides world history into 10 great weeks, each bringing humanity closer to final judgment and the renewal of all things. Whether one believes Enoch himself wrote every word, or that generations of scribes compiled these visions, one truth remains. This book carries secrets so profound, so unsettling, that the Western Church could not preserve it in the official canon. Yet in Ethiopia, the voice of Enoch never fell silent. Why was this book banned? For centuries, the Book of Enoch was studied and revered. The Essenes preserved it. Church fathers like Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria quoted it. The Epistle of Jude in the New Testament directly cites Enoch's prophecy. And yet, by the 4th century, it had vanished from most churches. There is no single decree banning it, but history offers clues. First, the book describes angels descending to earth, marrying human women, and teaching forbidden arts, the forging of weapons, the crafting of seductive ornaments, the practice of sorcery. Such vivid accounts troubled church leaders. These were subjects Scripture only hinted at. Enoch laid them bare. Second, the book expands dramatically on themes the canon keeps veiled in mystery. The architecture of heaven, the hierarchy of angels, the precise chronology from creation to final judgment. Some feared believers might treat these visions as doctrine when they had never been officially recognized. Third, as Christianity grew, leaders sought a unified canon. Books not universally accepted, especially those absent from the Hebrew scriptures, were gradually set aside. But perhaps most importantly, the Book of Enoch carries a warning that disturbed those in power. Divine beings can fall. Great power can be corrupted. The consequences of rebellion are catastrophic, not just for humanity, but for the angelic hosts themselves. For some, these were truths too dangerous to preserve. The world before the flood. To understand why the stories in Enoch carry such weight, we must journey to an age more distant than any surviving record, the era before the Great Flood. Picture an untouched world. Mountains rose deep and green. Rivers flowed crystal clear. Fields stretched beneath golden dawns, and trees bore fruit in every season. Humanity was few in number and had never known war. People lived close to nature and closer to the Creator than at any other time. They felt His presence in the wind, in the warmth of the sun, in every drop of rain. The nights were filled with stars, countless lights, as though watchful eyes from above were quietly looking on. The bond between heaven and earth remained unbroken. And then, from the highest realm, God sent a host of angels down to earth. They were called the Watchers. The sacred mission. From the dawn of creation, God saw not only the beauty of His handiwork, but the trials humanity would face. Out of deep love, He chose 200 angels, those He trusted most, not for the strength of their arms, but for the purity of their hearts. Their mission was not to rule, not to impose, but to stand at the edge of human life, watching, guarding, and when needed, reminding mankind not to stray from truth. They were sent across the world. Some stood upon mountain peaks with views over vast valleys. Others remained near winding rivers where families gathered to farm and build. From hidden places they watched, children laughing under moonlight, men and women laboring beneath the sun, prayers rising like thin smoke toward heaven. In those days, heaven and earth moved in harmony. The Watchers felt the sacred trust placed in them. But sometimes, closeness itself becomes the test. As years passed, certain eyes began to linger too long on those they were meant only to observe. Quiet curiosity grew into affection. Affection deepened into something forbidden, a longing to cross the boundary set since the dawn of time. And in that moment, the first seeds of rebellion took root. The oath on Mount Hermon. The Watchers were chosen for their absolute purity. In the heavenly realm, they possessed only compassion, righteousness, and the will to protect creation. Love, in the earthly sense, lust, physical desire, did not exist for them. Yet, dwelling among humanity, witnessing their smiles, their warmth, some angels allowed their hearts to waver. It was not action at first, only a fleeting thought that crossed the boundary God had set. But in the law of heaven, a single impure thought is enough to fracture the bond with the divine. Samjaza, their leader, understood this better than anyone. He knew that if he alone broke the command, he would bear the full weight of judgment. But if all took the same step together, they could share the consequence. So he summoned all 200 angels to Mount Hermon, a place shrouded in clouds, far from human sight. In the stillness, they stood in a circle. Samjaza spoke, urging them to take an oath. They would abandon their sacred post, take human wives, and share whatever fate followed, glory or condemnation. The oath rang out across the mountains, carried by the wind. In that moment, they separated themselves from heaven forever. The Nephilim. After the oath, The 200 angels crossed the boundary God had set since creation. They were no longer pure guardians. They had become beings who abandoned their station to walk a path from which there was no return. They descended from the heights, dwelling openly among mankind. The radiance of heaven still lingered on their faces. Their stately forms and deep, otherworldly eyes stirred both awe and dangerous fascination. The women of earth had never beheld such beauty, an otherworldly allure blending power and mystery, and the angels, who were chosen to preserve purity, now opened themselves to mortal affection. They took wives from among the daughters of men. These unions shattered the absolute divide between heaven and earth. It was the mingling of two natures never meant to be joined, one immortal and divine, the other mortal and made from dust. From these forbidden unions came a new race, the Nephilim. The Book of Enoch describes them as giants, towering, mighty beyond human measure. The blood of heaven gave them superhuman strength, yet their hearts were ruled by ambition and violence. They became ruthless rulers who saw mankind as slaves and destruction as sport. The earth trembled beneath their steps. Fields were plundered, homes burned, cries of anguish mingled with blood upon the ground. But this was only the beginning. With enormous bodies and boundless strength, the hunger of the Nephilim knew no limit. They devoured crops, livestock, and wild game. When nothing remained, their savage nature erupted. They swept into villages, killing any who resisted. And then, in their endless hunger, they began to consume human flesh itself. The Book of Enoch records that the earth was defiled by blood, and the cries of the suffering reached the very gates of heaven. Survivors fled into forests, hiding in caves to escape the giants' gaze. When prey grew scarce, the Nephilim turned upon each other, devouring their own kind. Terror spread across the face of the earth. The forbidden knowledge. As the Nephilim spread violence, some watchers went beyond simply taking wives. They began teaching humanity knowledge that had been sealed since creation, secrets belonging only to the heavenly realm. Azazel was the most corrupt of all. He revealed to men the art of forging weapons, teaching them to fashion swords, cast spears, and make armor. Mankind, once armed only with crude tools, now possessed the power to kill with terrifying efficiency. Blood spilled not only by the Nephilim, but between men themselves. But Azazel did not stop there. He taught women the arts of seduction, crafting ornaments from gold and silver, grinding precious stones into powder to paint their eyes. These were not gifts to honor natural beauty, but tools to stir lust and pride, turning hearts toward vanity. Forbidden knowledge mixed with ambition, weapons joined with desire. The world sank deeper into chaos. Meanwhile, Samjaza, who had led the oath on Mount Hermon, spread another form of forbidden knowledge. Not forged in fire and metal, but whispered in shadows, the art of enchantments and sorcery. He taught incantations, the drawing of symbols to summon, spirits, rituals to bend will and fate, divination to read the stars, methods to command unseen forces. At first, these teachings spread in secrecy, but soon sorcery became a power to be coveted. Tribes used it to crush enemies and secure dominion. Mysterious rites replaced true worship. People no longer offered sacrifices to God, but to shadowy spirits, seeking immediate power in return. Heaven watched as sin spread, no longer confined to the earth, but seeping into the very hearts of men. Judgment had arrived at the door. The 4 archangels. When the sins of the watchers exceeded all limits, God could remain silent no longer. From his sacred throne, he summoned the 4 most powerful archangels: Michael, commander of angels, symbol of unmatched strength and absolute justice; Uriel, keeper of divine light and wisdom, guiding lost souls. Raphael, angel of healing, protection, and comfort. Gabriel, authoritative messenger of God, bridging heaven and earth. These four were granted infinite power to execute divine command. Their mission: bind the watchers in the deepest darkness, seal them until the final day of judgment, and destroy the Nephilim who had ravaged the earth. This was not merely a battle on earth. It was a struggle to restore the cosmic order between heaven and the mortal realm. Bound in the abyss, the heavenly hosts gathered, their power like a roaring storm, pushing back darkness and disorder. The sky blazed with radiant fire. Thunder echoed, and a holy tempest rose between two worlds. Samjaza stood surrounded, fiercely resisting, using every remaining power to defend himself and his comrades. But the holy might of Michael and the archangels proved irresistible. A divine curse thundered like lightning. Chains of light, forged from faithfulness and God's own power, bound Samjaza and the Watchers. They were shackled, stripped of all power, and cast into a fathomless abyss, a place without light or life, only eternal darkness and imprisonment. Azazel was buried deep in the desert of Dudael, a barren, desolate place reserved for the most grievous offenders. There the fallen angels were sealed with sacred oaths that could never be broken, condemned to endure loneliness and remorse for thousands of years, awaiting the final judgment. This was not merely a physical clash. It was a cosmic struggle between justice and betrayal, light and darkness. It marked the tragic end of a glorious era, and stands as an eternal warning. No one escapes the righteous hand of God. The battle in heaven. The story of the Watchers is not isolated. It connects to a larger conflict spanning ages and heavens. Close your eyes and imagine, before man existed, before the world as we know it, there was a radiant angel called Lucifer, the morning star. He stood near the throne of God, possessing unmatched power and beauty. But within that light burned another fire, pride and envy. Lucifer saw Adam and Eve, small creatures created in God's image, granted dominion over the physical world. Envy welled within him. Unable to accept it, he rallied a portion of the angels to his side, challenging the authority of the Creator. The Book of Revelation records this great battle, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Michael stood firm as an undefeated warrior. In his hand was a sword of divine light, shining brighter than the sun, radiating warmth and justice. The light of loyalty, sanctity, and righteousness from Michael and his hosts spread fiercely, gradually pushing darkness from heaven. From this earth-shaking battle, Lucifer, now called Satan, and the fallen angels were cast into the abyss, stripped of glory and position. And their rebellion opened a new chapter, one filled with trials, where darkness would sow terror upon the earth. The Great Flood. After the battle concluded, the consequences of rebellion continued spreading. The rebels and the Nephilim brought forth violence and sin beyond measure, prompting God to deliver final judgment. Imagine an ancient world where the original light of creation slowly faded, where darkness seeped into every corner. The cries of the oppressed echoed everywhere, mingling with destruction brought by the Nephilim. God looked upon the world with profound sorrow. He saw that destruction, sin, and violence had shaken cosmic order. The time had come to act. Dark clouds gathered, covering the sky. Water poured down like raging torrents. The rain fell ceaselessly. Floods rose high, drowning valleys, plains, hills, and cities. All living beings were submerged, leaving only silence in their wake. Amid this storm, one righteous man was chosen. Noah, the sole beacon of unwavering faith. God entrusted him with a sacred mission: build a great ark to preserve life through the flood. This vessel was not merely a means of survival. It was a symbol of God's boundless mercy. Within its walls, Noah, his family, and pure creatures were safeguarded to begin anew on a cleansed earth. The Nephilim, fierce embodiments of chaos and betrayal, could not survive this judgment. They were utterly swept away, disappearing from the earth, marking the end of a dark era. The waters did not only extinguish life, they washed away every trace of sin, leaving a pure foundation where new life could sprout under the light of hope. The Day of Judgment. The Book of Enoch describes a day when the vast heavens blaze with divine light. The earth trembles and the universe holds its breath. Every soul, from those who lived in righteousness to those who sank into darkness, is summoned before God's throne to face impartial judgment. Heavens, gates open. Ethereal mists envelop the space. Mysterious light penetrates hearts. Every secret is unveiled. Every deed is judged with unyielding justice. The sinners, those who transgressed sacred boundaries, broke oaths, spread forbidden knowledge, manipulated through sorcery, committed murder, deceit, and violence without remorse, are cast into the deepest pits of darkness, a place devoid of light, where cries of torment echo endlessly. Their punishment transcends physical suffering. It is the harshest spiritual judgment, where souls bear the full consequences of their earthly actions. In contrast, righteous souls who maintained faith and lived in love are lifted beside God in eternal, glorious light. They enter everlasting life, free from suffering, embraced by perfect joy and unity with the Creator. The Book of Enoch divides human history into 10 great weeks, each representing an era filled with challenges. The judge appears at the end of the 10th week, signaling the conclusion of the fallen age and the dawn of a new kingdom, a world of justice, peace, and God's eternal presence. This is not merely an end, it is a beginning, a new journey where eternal light illuminates every soul. Guardian angels among us. If the Watchers represent what happens when divine beings fall, guardian angels remind us of heaven's enduring protection. In many traditions, each person has a guardian angel assigned by God to protect and guide them throughout life. These angels rarely appear with dramatic signs. They move quietly, whispering warnings when danger is near, opening unexpected doors, settling inexplicable peace over troubled hearts. Scripture declares in Psalm 91:11, "For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." This is not abstract theology. Countless people have testified to experiences that defy explanation. A firefighter in New York, 2001, was feeling his way through a burning building when his oxygen ran low, and the heat became unbearable. Amid flames and collapsing beams, he heard a calm, steady voice. "This way." He turned down a dark hallway. Seconds later, the ceiling where he had been standing crashed down. When rescued, no one could explain where the voice came from. A woman in California, 1983, lost control of her car in heavy rain. It flipped several times. When she opened her eyes, a man dressed in white stood at her door, his gaze warm, his voice gentle. "Everything will be all right." He pulled her from the wreckage. When the ambulance arrived, he had vanished. On the wet ground, the only footprints were her own. A soldier in World War II, separated from his unit after fierce fighting, crouched in a bomb crater as flares lit the sky and bullets whistled past. At dawn, a soldier in an unfamiliar uniform appeared, calm and unhurried, pointing. "Go that way." The soldier obeyed and found his unit beyond the ridge. No one had ever seen the mysterious man. Whether in blazing fires, storm-lashed, highways, battlefields, or quiet homes, these stories carry the same message. Somewhere, even when our eyes cannot see, angels sent by God guard and lift us up. The 7 Archangels. If guardian angels are quiet companions walking beside us, archangels stand as heaven's generals, mighty leaders, trusted messengers, healers, and heralds of divine prophecy. Michael, whose name means "who is like God," is the great commander of heaven's armies. In Revelation, he rises to confront the dragon, leading celestial forces against Satan and his angels. His presence embodies unwavering loyalty and divine order. Gabriel, "God is my strength," is the herald of heaven's most profound messages. He appeared to Daniel, revealing visions of future kingdoms. He came to Zechariah, foretelling John the Baptist's birth. And he stood before the Virgin Mary with words that changed the world. "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." Raphael, "God heals," appears in the Book of Tobit, disguised as a traveler, guiding young Tobias on a dangerous journey, protecting him from a demon, and teaching him to heal his father's blindness. He embodies God's compassion for the suffering. Uriel, light of God, is associated with divine wisdom and prophecy. Some traditions say he warned Noah of the coming flood, illuminating dark paths of human ignorance. Selaphiel is remembered as the angel of prayer, carrying supplications to God's throne. Jagudiel is the encourager, strengthening the weary and urging them to continue God's work. Barakiel, blessings of God, is often invoked for families and children. Together, these 7 form a divine council of service and strength. Their roles, from Michael's sword to Selaphiel's folded hands, are different threads in the same tapestry, each woven by the hand of God. Visions beyond the veil. Throughout history, people on the threshold between life and death have reported extraordinary encounters. An old fisherman from Maine, caught in a sudden storm, was swept into the sea. When he opened his eyes, he stood on a shore unlike any he had known. The sand glowed like powdered gold. Waves made of light rolled in, breaking in cascades of brilliance. Figures in shimmering robes moved toward him, angels with wings arching behind them, their faces carrying peace so complete it made his eyes sting. He was almost within reach when he heard his wife's voice calling his name, not aged, but young, full of life. The angels paused, watching. He turned toward the sound. The shore began to dim. He woke, coughing, pulled into a rescue boat as the storm still raged. But he never forgot that other shore, or the angels who had been ready to welcome him home. A World War II veteran, 94 years old, collapsed in his armchair one winter morning. When he opened his eyes, he stood tall and strong in his crisp olive uniform from youth. Before him stretched a road paved with white stone, glowing faintly under a sky without sun or shadow. On either side stood ranks of angels, robed in shimmering starlight, some bearing swords, others carrying banners that rippled in an unfelt wind. Further down the road, among the angels, he saw faces he recognized, Men he had fought beside, thought of every day for 70 years. They were just as they had been on the best days of the war. Some saluted, others smiled. "Welcome home, brother." He was almost there when his son's voice reached him. "Dad, stay with us." The road faded, the faces blurred. He woke to find his son holding his hand, tears brimming. The old soldier whispered, "I saw them. They're waiting." The angel at Castel Sant'Angelo. The year was 590. Rome was a city under death's shadow. The plague struck without warning, moving like an invisible shadow through narrow streets, seeping into homes without mercy. Every morning church bells rang, not for celebration, but for the dead. Pope Gregory the Great could not bear to remain safe while his people suffered. He walked among the sick, blessing them, praying with them, offering what comfort he could. But he knew human effort alone could not turn the tide. What Rome needed was divine mercy. Gregory called for a great public procession. Clergy, monks, nuns, and faithful would walk through the streets carrying sacred icons, singing litanies, begging heaven to intervene. Their cry rose in a single repeated prayer: Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. The morning of the procession was grey, the air heavy with unnatural stillness. Families emerged slowly, faces marked by grief. Mothers held children's hands. Men walked with heads bowed. The crowd grew as it moved toward the massive stone mausoleum of Emperor Hadrian, a fortress standing at the bend of the Tiber River. As the procession crossed the bridge, Gregory lifted his gaze to the summit of the ancient walls, and there, silhouetted against shifting clouds, stood a figure of dazzling light. Tall, beyond mortal measure, robed in silver that flowed like molten metal, with wings spread wide, each feather edged in gold that pulsed like living fire. In his hand he held a great sword, its blade reflecting brilliance no earthly metal could match. The angel's gaze swept over the city. Then, with slow, deliberate motion, he lifted the sword high above his head. For a long moment, he held it aloft. The air seemed to still. Even the chanting faltered. And then, the angel lowered the sword. The blade slid into its scabbard with finality, a gesture solemn and sure, sealing a decree from heaven itself. Gregory understood at once. The plague would end. God had heard their cries. In the days that followed, the death toll fell. The sick recovered. Slowly, Rome's streets filled again with the sounds of life. The mausoleum was never called by its old name again. It became Castel Sant'Angelo, the castle of the Holy Angel. And centuries later, a great statue of Archangel Michael was placed atop its summit, forever capturing the moment when heaven's warrior descended not to strike, but to save. The promise that endures. The Book of Enoch opens a window into mysteries that most of the world chose to forget. The fall of the Watchers, the rise of the Nephilim, the judgment that cleansed the earth, and the promise of final redemption. Yet perhaps its deepest teaching is this: the boundary between heaven and earth is thinner than we imagine. Angels walked among us once, and, according to countless testimonies, they walk among us still, not as rebels defying God, but as guardians carrying out His will. The Watchers who fell remind us that even the highest can be corrupted when they abandon their sacred purpose. But the archangels who rose to restore order remind us that light always triumphs over darkness when it remains faithful to the source. Whether you believe these stories literally or read them as spiritual metaphor, the message endures across millennia. We are seen, known, and loved by something far greater than ourselves. Heaven watches, angels stand ready, And the God who set the stars in motion still calls each of us by name. Tonight, as sleep approaches, imagine those ancient guardians keeping vigil. Picture wings forming a canopy of light above you. Remember that the same God who revealed mysteries to Enoch, who sent Michael to defend Rome, who stations angels at the gates of paradise, watches over you in this very moment. The stories of heaven continue. And somewhere in that boundless book of eternity your name is written, not in ink that fades, but in the everlasting script of heaven itself. Rest now in his peace.